Karoline Leavitt stepping down as White House press secretary. Our Ed O'Keefe will tell us what he knows. The primaries continue to surprise. Wisconsin delivers a bit of a stunner. Our Anthony Salvanto reveals the path to David Crowley's upset victory over Francesca Hong. Luke Bronin last night defeated 14-term House incumbent John Larson. It wasn't ideological, but generational. So, where does it fit in the Democratic Party identity crisis saga? Well, we'll ask Luke. Did the Democratic establishment screw Bernie Sanders in 2016? One of his top advisors has written a book that says, yes, it did. We ask about that and if Sanders is the party broker now. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. Let's start with some new news from the White House. Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt is leaving her position at the end of the month. This announcement made late today by President Trump, who says she wants to spend more time with her family. More on this a bit later with Ed O'Keefe. But let's start with the winners. As with earlier primaries, results last night were mixed. And if you are looking for a seamless story with an absolutely linear through line of political impulses, you won't find it here because it doesn't exist. Things are jumbled. Some progressives won, some lost. Some Republicans with President Trump's endorsement won, some lost. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a time of friction, faction, and frustrations. Voters are in volatile moods. Candidates and coalitions, therefore, rise and fall in unpredictable ways. Take Wisconsin. About a week ago, State Representative and Democratic Socialist Francesca Hong appeared well ahead in her bid to win the Democratic nomination for governor. But last night, Hong lost. Yes, it was narrow, but it's a loss nonetheless to Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley. This morning, Hong joined Crowley and other party leaders at a unity breakfast, underscoring that all would be resolved, and rapidly. Crowley used his victory speech to dissect the dominant narrative nowadays. You know, progressive versus establishment, insider versus insurgent. Listen.
That narrative misses the entire point of what we're doing. Because when I traveled across Wisconsin, I didn't meet people who introduced themselves that way. I met parents wondering how they'll afford childcare. I met workers who want wages that keep up with the cost of living. I met farmers trying to preserve family traditions. We may not agree on every policy. We may not use the same labels. But we all want safe communities, strong schools, affordable health care, good paying jobs, and a brighter future for all of our children.
In Minnesota, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan defeated Congresswoman Angie Craig, winning by 20 points despite being outspent in campaign ads at least 4-1. That was for the Democratic nomination for the U.S. Senate. Flanagan positioned herself as a progressive fighter and criticized Craig sharply for supporting a Trump-backed immigration law called the Lincoln-Riley Act.
Here are the things that I'm ready to throw down for. Ending the despicable priorities of an administration that hands out tax breaks to billionaires, builds gilded ballrooms, and spends billions on bombs while screwing over working people. No matter how hard they try to tear me down to buy this Senate seat, I know that you won't be fooled. Because we have a choice, and it's a simple one. Minnesota can send another Donald Trump yes sir senator to do his bidding, or we can insist on change and send someone who will always put Minnesota first.
In South Carolina, as we predicted last night on this show, a runoff now ensues to fill the seat of late Senator Lindsey Graham. His sister, Darlene, finished first. Congressman Ralph Norman came in second. The two will square off in the August 25th runoff. Trump endorsed Darlene, and today, South Carolina's other Republican Senator, Tim Scott, followed suit. Darlene Graham was appointed to fill her brother's seat and surprised many Palmetto State Republicans by deciding to seek a full 6-year term. Last night, Norman described Darlene Graham as a bit of a mystery.
Well, I don't know where she stands on a lot of issues. I think that's where we'll find out, where she stand on pro-life, where she stand on the death penalty, where will she stand on spending. So we'll get into the debate, which I welcome the debate. My record is an open book.
Darlene Graham captured about 33% of the vote to Norman's 25%. Three other candidates received 40%. The task ahead for Norman and Graham: capture as much of that leftover vote as possible and do so quickly.
It's been absolutely brutal. This past month has been brutal. Today is the 11th. My brother passed 1 month ago today. So none of this has been comfortable for me. But like I said, I'm a fighter. I have buried my precious brother. I have taken on the role of a United States Senator, and I have had this brutal campaign schedule, and I'm still standing. If that doesn't tell you I'm a strong person and a fighter, nothing will. So I think I can handle the next 2 weeks.
We're going to start tonight in Minnesota with Jonah Kaplan. Jonah, a lot to wrap up for us. Please go ahead.
Where to begin, Major, especially if we look at that Senate race. We've talked about how the polls have been wrong, and then we've had much more competitive races in Michigan and then Wisconsin last night. This was the opposite. The polls saw this, Peggy Flanagan versus Angie Craig, as competitive, and she trounced her competitor. Peggy Flanagan, what her victory really reveals is how the base here, the Democratic base in Minnesota, still so traumatized by the Operation Metro Surge. All of those federal agents coming here and descending on the Twin Cities in January and February, the result of thousands of undocumented immigrants, many of them criminals arrested, but also in those fiery protests, 2 Americans were killed, Alex Preddy and Renee Good. With Flanagan now winning, you see a different contrast, because for her it's a referendum on the Trump administration and the Trump administration's priorities, especially immigration. But Michelle Tafoya, the Republican nominee, she's making this a referendum about Minnesota's Democratic leadership and talking about the long-time and long-held Democratic positions of social services and social handouts and the fraud that has captured a lot of national attention, those $1 billion of fraud dating back to COVID. So this is really going to be a kind of get your popcorn ready kind of race.
Jonah Kaplan in Minnesota, thank you so very much. Let's turn now to our Torian Small, who stayed in Madison, Wisconsin for us tonight. I'm very deeply appreciative of that. Torian, wrap up what happened in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, don't call it a comeback. Such a difference 10 days can make for David Crowley. On July 8th, he decided to drop out of the race, saying that he found no pathway forward. On the 18th, he said he'll be returning with the endorsement of Governor Tony Evers, somewhat of a kingmaker and deciding factor in this race. That narrow margin that we saw last night was indicative of just how chaotic and crowded this race was. Several dropouts led to this moment where we saw Crowley really advance and secure the nomination. Ultimately, though, he decided that he wasn't going to pile on in the limited amount of time he had to really sprint to this primary on top of Democratic Socialist Francesca Hong, the center of relentless attack ads from Republicans already spending millions of dollars on this race. He said he would rather open this up as a big tent party, and we saw just moments after accepting the nomination, Francesca Hong was well in line with him, saying that she was lending her full support behind him, telling her supporters to do so as well. As we look ahead to November's, Tom Tiffany, the Republican nominee, will most definitely make this race about common sense for Wisconsinites and the ideological future moving forward, and progressivism. He can't use democratic socialism as the bait here, but he's likely going to link Crowley and Hong together as they look to campaign and show this line of unity for Democrats ahead of the November election day.
Torian Small, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Joining me now, your friend and mine, CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, at the big board. Anthony, explain to my audience how David Crowley won this upset victory. What was the path?
Another late night waiting for Wisconsin results last night. But this is what unfolded. These yellow areas, a little bit more suburban counties, a little bit better for Crowley there, marginally so, but consistently so. He'll make the argument those are the kinds of Democrats, kinds of voters they'll need to turn out in November. The other part of this, though, I'm going to zoom in because, of course, we're up late waiting for Milwaukee to count, where Crowley overall in the county did well. And I'm going to zoom you in a little bit more on Milwaukee because it tells a story in microcosm here a little bit. I'm going to zoom in on the city, and I'll show you that these areas here in purple, more for Crowley, more traditionally Democratic areas, more working class areas. At the same time, places that Hong did better, Shorewood, down here through the central city, in general, some a little bit more affluent, some a little bit younger. Not enough young people turned out to put her over the top, but that's a little bit of a pattern that you see there. So it wasn't just looking at the county, it was looking at where within the county, and that tells a little bit of the story statewide, Major.
Anthony, after races like this, questions arise yet again about the reliability of polls. It's devilishly hard to poll in a primary, especially in a race in Wisconsin on this governor's race was on the Democratic side that was so upset by people coming in and coming out of the race, being on the ballot still because of mail-in balloting, but no longer competing actively. What can we say about the polls miscasting or misrepresenting what the actual result turned out to be?
It's a great question, and it's a great lesson. Number one, campaigns are dynamic things. You just mentioned a few things, but look, we cover them as the candidates are going here, ad spending here and there. We're expecting voters to be persuaded or to move. So if you rely on polls that were done 3, 4, 5 weeks prior, don't be surprised if things are different on election day from that. In fact, here, when you had the sitting governor start talking about his endorsements in the race late, and by the way, let's not forget, it's summertime. Yeah, we're watching the show, we're political junkies, we're concentrated on this, but a lot of voters might have tuned in late. That's number one. Things move, and polls at the end are going to be more reliable than the ones early on. The second part of this, though, is a turnout dynamic story that speaks to coalitions. A lot of those polls, and we didn't do them, so I'm speaking generally, but they had a lot of young people in them. Well, that's part of that coalition that progressive Democrats are trying to turn out. But at the same time, that is often the least reliable group to turn out. So that tells a broader story as well as a polling one, Major.
Anthony Salvato, thank you very, very much. Luke Bronin joins me now. He defeated 14-term Democratic Congressman John Larson in last night's primary in Connecticut's 1st District. Luke, I'm very glad to have you here. I came across what I regard as a fun fact about you. You are a guitarist and a songwriter, and one of your songs was featured on an episode of Dawson's Creek. So I've got to ask you, what's more cool, doing that or having that happen in your life, or winning this election?
I can tell you what's more cool to my 3 kids is definitely the song, but that feels like another lifetime ago.
This was generational, not ideological, yes?
Look, I think that at the heart of this campaign was the fact that we're in a moment of crisis in this country. We have a president who is out of control. We have an economy that feels broken to most Americans. And we need to see a Democratic Party that's just bringing a whole different kind of energy to this fight, that is being clear and bold about the things we're fighting for. And so I think it's a little bit of both. You know, we have to recognize that when things feel broken, the answers can't be small. And also that if we're going to be successful at making any change, we've got to be a whole lot better at building a movement outside the walls of the Capitol. And that means bringing in Democrats who are able to be out there engaging in a different kind of way, communicating in a different kind of way. And again, just bringing a whole different kind of energy.
I respect the slogan about energy, but if you can be specific, what did you see that lacked energy, and what do you bring that is relevant new energy?
First of all, you have to be serious about engaging with voters. I mean, there are so many young Americans who have given up on our politics. There's so many people who used to vote for Democrats who stopped believing that Democrats are focused on those issues that they feel in their lives every day. And some of it really is just about being out there every single day, serious about carrying that message everywhere you can. You know, whether it is on the podcast, whether it's going on every show you can like this, or whether it's just out there in the community, talking with voters in unscripted ways, carrying that message. And there's a lot of Democrats, I think, especially Democrats in Congress, who think of the job as, too much stuck inside the institution, that it's they're still in the mindset of sending a strongly worded letter or sending out a press release about some legislation they filed that's never going to see the light of day. It really is about being outside the walls of the Capitol and engaging in a different kind of way. So I think that actually matters. I don't think we can discount that or say that that's just a style difference. That's a lot of what we need to do better as a party.
Several other very experienced House Democrats have lost in primaries this cycle, and it is shorthanded, Luke, sometimes as an identity crisis for the Democratic Party. Do you regard it as such?
I don't know if it's an identity crisis of the Democratic Party, but I think this is a moment that we as a party have to be more willing to embrace change and embrace new voices. I've said throughout this campaign, I think we would be a stronger party if more of our leaders recognize that part of leadership is knowing when it's time to pass the torch. Now, I think one of the things that was unique about my race is that, yeah, it was a race about generational change, but it wasn't just about generational change. I bring a range of experience to this work. I served in the Obama administration at the Treasury Department. I was part of the team that helped to create the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and then served on the national security side. I'm a Navy veteran, served in Afghanistan, and was mayor of our capital city, a city that's been left behind in a lot of ways, and served there for 8 years. So bringing a range of perspectives that I think matter, and also saying that we would be a stronger party if we allow more renewal more often.
I don't have to tell you, Luke, that much of what Trump 2.0 in the White House has been about has been taking apart as much as it can of the Obama agenda and accomplishments and Biden agenda and accomplishments. So if you had to prioritize one thing you want to get back in that they tried to take away or have taken away, what would it be? And what's your add value legislatively or in proposals in terms of ideas on top of that?
Look, there's a long list of things they've destroyed that we need to fix. But, I'll just start with the one I just talked about, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which was established in the wake of the financial crisis to protect Americans against financial abuse, against predatory lending, and they've demolished it. And I want to build it. I'd love to be part of rebuilding it and protecting it, making sure that it can protect Americans. But there's so much damage that they're doing across the board, right? I mean, they just moved special education out from the Department of Education and put it under RFK Jr. It's mind-blowing how little regard they have for the seriousness of the work that the federal government can do to make a difference in people's lives.
Luke Bronin, congratulations, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Ed O'Keefe joins me now from the North Lawn of the White House. We have news about Karoline Leavitt. What do we know, Ed?
She's leaving, Major. The president announcing this afternoon that she's off to become what he calls an outside advisor to him and the Republican Party as they prepare for the midterms. These kinds of departures do happen often right before or right after the midterms as the first wave of staff want to get out of the way and figure out what to do with the rest of their lives, either in the private sector and the quasi-public sector. Seems she's going to do at least a little advising from the political operation first. Let's remember, though, she's had a second child. Early indications are that has a lot to do with this, that she wants to be able to do that. She will end up being the second longest serving Trump press secretary after Sarah Huckabee Sanders and the youngest ever to hold the job. But I would note, since returning from maternity leave, I think we can count on one hand the number of briefings that she's held, which is a signal and a reminder that if you're working in the communications shop for Donald J. Trump, it can be a bit of a frustrating fool's errand because ultimately whatever his administration policy is what he says. And as you know, Major, he has a way of contradicting what those in his government have said even just minutes before him.
Two questions, Ed. Any inkling this was coming? That's one, continuing on the Karoline Leavitt subject. And then also, this now feels like day two of the Air Force switcheroo story. What new information do we have about that?
There were no indications, at least from for this reporter and those I've been speaking with, that she was preparing to go. But again, the lower frequency of briefings perhaps is an indication that they're at least settling into a different groove when it comes to how they engage us on a regular basis. The president does plenty of it himself. As for the plane switch, what we now know is who exactly was on which flight out of Ankara, Turkey, last month. The president himself, remember, was scurried into a catering truck off of that version of Air Force One, and he was joined, we're now told, by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and close aides Walt Nauta, his body guy, Natalie Harp, one of his closest aides, and Deputy Chief of Staff Dan Scavino. They went with him to the smaller 757. Those remaining aboard that jet right there, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, two senior members of the line of succession, we should point out, as well as Stephen Miller and a handful of other senior aides who are flying back, dozens of other White House support staff, Secret Service agents, and, of course, journalists. Major.
Ed O'Keefe, thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Still to come. Ohio Republican Congressman Max Miller has been politically wounded by domestic abuse allegations that he vehemently denies. His Democratic opponent, Brian Poindexter, wants to talk about everything but that, and he will join us to explain why. Also, the Los Angeles Lakers, you've heard of them. Well, they're sold for the second time in the past 12 months. Big-name buyers, former Disney CEO Bob Iger and Joshua Kushner, brother of White House envoy Jared Kushner. The price, $12.5 billion. Plus, Europe has been suffering all summer from heat waves and drought. Finally, some fun with the sun. A total eclipse, and we'll take a look at the Europeans looking. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. Congressional Democrats have an initiative they call Red to Blue, and the name kind of gives it away. It focuses on a few dozen House races where Democrats hope to unseat Republicans, Red to Blue. Candidates in the program, well, they get a few things. They get some additional campaign cash, some strategic advice, and fundraising help. A new candidate was added to that list yesterday. His name, Brian Poindexter, who's running against Ohio Republican Max Miller in Ohio's 7th District. And Brian Poindexter joins us now. Brian, I know, because I've read other interviews, you are not keen to talk about Max Miller's private problems, which have been well documented. I understand that. But the reality is, the reason you're on Red to Blue is because he's in hot water now politically because of those underlying charges, which, as I said before, he vehemently denies. So do you have any opinion about his political standing, where this race is, and how you got on the Red to Blue list?
Well, I want to make one thing absolutely clear. We were going to get on Red to Blue, whether these allegations came to light or not. We built a campaign around fighting for working families, and that is very strong in this area of Ohio that's made up of hardworking families. We had already built a campaign that is running a strong race on the ground. We've seen people from the Democratic Party, the Independents, and the Republican Party who have decided they wanted to back me because of what we're fighting for, not necessarily who we're fighting against. Now, make no mistake, though, these allegations are very serious, and people I talk to in the district are shaken by them. As a father of two daughters, I'm shaken by them. But we didn't get in this race because Max Miller is terrible in his personal life. We got in this race because the policies he supports are terrible for the working families of this district.
President Trump won your district, the 7th, by 11 points. That's a steep hill to climb. Why do you believe that hill is climbable?
Because I'm approaching it just like I have in my whole life. One foot in front of the other, talking to people from all across the political spectrum. And, make no mistake, Trump did win it by 11, but this is a district that Sherrod Brown runs well in because it's whichever candidate can capture the attention of the workers in this district who say, hey, I'm going to fight for you. That's who they tend to vote for. And President Trump came on scene with a message of bringing back manufacturing, making it a golden age for workers. And that just hasn't realized. And, that's why I believe even before anybody else in the country took notice of our race, I knew we were going to win because I am from the heart of the district. I work hard just like the people in this district. And I believe they're rallying around us because of that message.
Brian, you're on the city council. You're a unionized iron worker. And I'm sure in this Trump era, many of your iron worker friends told you why they backed Trump. Why did they? And do you sense, maybe for the first time since that era began in 2016, some estrangement from Trump among your iron worker friends?
Yeah, a lot of my friends and my family members have voted for Trump, and some of them still support Trump to this day. But they all have to face themselves in a mirror, and they're all being real with themselves and understanding that things are harder now than they have been in quite some time. And it's because that the golden age for workers hasn't realized, costs are up, wages have stagnated, and people just can't make it to that next paycheck anymore. And they're looking for change. And, I'm not running a race against Trump. He's not on the ballot, but a lot of his policies are. And my opponent has supported those policies every step of the way that has got us into this mess. He supported the war in Iran multiple times, the tariffs multiple times. He voted for the one big ugly bill, and then wanted to backtrack and reinstate the ACA subsidies. It's like a fireman or an arsonist being applauded for putting out a fire he started. And people are realizing that some of these policies aren't what's good for working families, and they're ready for change. And I'm the change that they're gonna want.
Let me talk to you very quickly, Brian, about that so-called big, beautiful bill, because part of it includes no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. If you're elected to Congress, do you vote against all those tax cuts?
Well, I would like to see those permanent. Those are temporary tax cuts, but the tax cuts for the ultra wealthy are permanent. But no, working families are having a hard time making it. And what I've come to realize through this race is that there's 3 reasons why working people don't want to pay taxes. 1, they don't like what our tax money is used for. 2, this is the big one, when there's not enough money left over in your paycheck after taxes. And 3, they don't like paying taxes when the rich people won't pay their taxes. And I think if we solve those items, I think people will really think that I did a good job as a congressman.
Brian Poindexter, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you want to learn more, you can go to poindexterforcongress.com and read all about us. Thank you.
I'm sure that you can. Brian Poindexter, appreciate it. Coming up, former National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster explains what's complicating the Iran talks. There's a lot of things. We'll get into them when we come back. This is The Takeout. Welcome back to Takeout. Welcome to the Conversation Corner. Here's a look at what else we and now you are watching this evening. Los Angeles Lakers are being sold again. Joshua Kushner, brother of Jared Kushner, and former Disney CEO Bob Iger, buying the team in a deal valued at $12.5 billion. Businessman Mark Walter bought the franchise just last year in a $10 billion acquisition. The NBA's Board of Governors still needs to sign off on that deal. They are scheduled to consider it in September. A good portion of Europe got a chance to see a total solar eclipse today, doing so carefully. That's when the sun seemingly disappears as the moon passes in front of it. It casts a shadow on our planet that completely blocks the sun's light from some areas of our planet, what's known as the minutes of totality. This was Europe's first total solar eclipse in 27 years. The United States and the Iranian-backed Houthis carried out separate attacks on shipping vessels near the Strait of Hormuz. Now, before the war began, about 130 ships per day moved through that waterway. According to Reuters, only 8 ships traversed the strait within the past week, marking a new low. Joining me now, CBS News contributor H.R. McMaster. He was one of 4 national security advisors to President Trump during his first administration. HR, we'll get to the Strait of Hormuz in a second, but I've got to ask you about the Air Force One misdirection story. You've flown on Air Force One many times. You have a keen understanding of national security threats flying in and out of sensitive areas of the world. How do you evaluate the evasive maneuvers the Secret Service ordered the president to take, and those who flew with the president and those who were stuck on the decoy Air Force One?
Yeah. Hey, Major. Well, it seemed like the system worked to me in terms of protecting the president. There was a clear connection between the Secret Service and the intelligence agencies that gave the president, I'm sure, the heads up, or Secret Service the heads up. It's clear that the Iranians are trying to kill him. This isn't a secret that they've tried to get others to kill him in the past. They've released, the RGC released a video, a pattern of life video on the First Lady and the president's son Barron. So So I think that the system worked in this case in terms of the handoff, and I think we just have to remain vigilant because Iran does have a pretty extensive terrorist network, sleeper cell network, especially in Europe, where they've conducted many assassinations over the years, Major. So I think the concern was the location that he was in Europe, and these credible threats, maybe involving a shoulder fired air defense weapon system of some kind.
Does that speak to residual Iranian capabilities that have not been, to use the phrase the president frequently uses, decimated?
Well, I mean, this is a terrorist network. They've got all sorts of capabilities that they've been using since 1979. And I think what they are is in a position of profound weakness at this stage. Major, what I see them doing with the Houthis, for example, trying to mobilize the Iraqi militias, and now the Iraqi government really taking that problem on, trying to reinvigorate and reconstitute Hezbollah, but having a hard time there. Hamas has been unable to gain any more traction. So I think they're in a real position of weakness, and they're grasping at anything that they can. And they believe, I think, largely because they're watching, reporting in the U.S., reporting about, the popularity of the war, the unpopularity of the war. They think they can break President Trump's will, with these attacks on the Strait, with the various threats against him, and now affecting shipping in the Bab el-Mandeb as well.
So the president said today on social media that we have, meaning the United States, total control over the Strait of Hormuz. Quote, I think we will keep it. That's not a serious idea, is it, HR?
I think it is if he has the will to do it, Major. But of course, that wouldn't be without risk or cost to do it. I think what he might be talking about is the ability to deny Iran exports and imports, through the Strait, and that's having a big effect on the Iranian economy. And I think what you have is the Iranians at this stage thinking they can break President Trump's will because of the unpopularity of the war, with the midterms coming up. And then you have, I think, President Trump endeavoring to kind of choke the regime out financially. And there have been a number of other measures taken that I think indicate that strategy might work. Not only the blockade itself, but a lot more extensive financial actions going after banks and other institutions with secondary sanctions that are moving money for the Iranians. And for a long time, Major, there was in the Emirates and in Qatar, they thought, hey, the best way to protect ourselves against Iranian aggression is to be their bankers, to help them with their cash flows. Well, how did that work out? It didn't work out. So they're losing that capability as well. We also were able to gain control of a lot of Bitcoin that they were moving around. All these senior officials, who portray themselves as, pious Islamists, are really criminals. And so we're going after a lot of their offshore bank accounts. And this is a campaign that I think has the chance of success in terms of restricting Iran's ability to project power outside of its borders, and in particular, reconstitute its terrorist organizations. And I hope that President Trump sticks with it.
H.R. McMaster, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you. Chief strategist for Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign has a new book on why he thinks the Democratic Party worked against their campaign. That's putting it mildly. He joins me next here on The Takeout. Welcome back. In a new book, the chief strategist for Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign argues the party establishment conspired to prevent Sanders from capturing the nomination. The title sort of gives it away, How the Democrats Screwed Bernie. I spoke to its author, Tad Devine, earlier today, and here's some of our conversation. Tad, I promise we'll get to the book in a second, but in the here and now, what is happening in the Democratic Party? Is it an identity crisis? Is it a hard left versus regular left schism?
I don't think there is a schism like that. I think what's happening is people are very frustrated right now, and they want someone who starts to talk to them about the issues of their lives. The issue is they can't afford anything. There's no opportunity. Everything's crushing down on them. They've got a government that's dysfunctional, and there are very powerful voices out there that are talking about new ideas and new plans to, make things work better again. I don't think the Democratic Party is nearly as divided as people think it is. I think, and what's happening in Wisconsin right now, is an example of that. You got someone who ran a campaign, the pollsters. By the way, primary polling is almost impossible, okay?
Yes,
when it comes to horse race. So, people are misled by that. But, people say, oh, what happened? How can this,
Francesca Hong had a lead,
right.
thought to be the front runner, loses narrowly.
Yes.
Then they have a unity breakfast this morning.
Yeah.
Where everyone's on board.
Yeah, and I'm not one of the Democrats. I am a Democrat, too. I'm not a Democratic Socialist. I'm a Democrat. And I'm one of the Democrats who doesn't want the Democratic Socialists to go out and run in November as a third party, because we're going to lose every election if that happens.
Right.
So I welcome them to be part of the Democratic Party, and if they participate and win, I think we should support them.
So I want to get your sense, because you write in the book about the 3 most important things for a successful candidate: authenticity, emotion, storytelling. And I will give you 3 names from this cycle, and I want you to evaluate what happened to them. Abdul El Sayed in Michigan, Graham Plattner in Maine, Francesca Hong in Wisconsin. Yeah. Okay? El Sayed is the one who's going to go on, who won his primary.
Right.
Graham Plattner had Bernie's endorsements, a lot of stuff behind him, then it collapsed. Francesca Hong never got Bernie's endorsement or AOC's.
Interesting. And
lost narrowly. Run me through those 3.
Well, I think they all had a tremendous element of authenticity. They were different than the typical politicians. They presented themselves as themselves. They talked about issues that connected with the people. I think with El Sayed, you've got a doctor who cares about health care. Okay, and that's about as authentic as it gets.
And who ran in 2018 and is eventually saying the same things now he said in 2018.
That's right.
So there's a through line.
There is. And then, listen, that was true with Bernie for over 40 or 50 years, not just, a few years. So I think you had authentic candidates. I think they had interesting stories. I think there was emotional impact. But in the end, voters are going to make decisions about candidates, not just about what they're saying, but who they are. And I think in 2 of those 3 instances, in Plattner, they started to hear some really bad things about his past. With
which
Hong,
were discoverable but tolerated for a while.
Yeah, because
erroneously,
I think so. Because as the evidence mounted, in terms of these allegations against him, it became clear to people that this is something that probably is more likely to be true than not true.
So there is an establishment versus non-establishment dynamic going on, and that's one of your gripes in your book.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm not saying the establishment doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah. So talk to me about that and what that thing is actually about. The Democratic establishment. Sure. What does that mean to you? Why does it send the party in erroneous ways, and why does it need to be toppled?
Well, listen, I used 2016 as a case study of what happened. And that establishment then really controlled the party and the way it picked our nominee for president. And it imposed a set of rules that made it almost impossible for someone who wasn't part of the establishment to be the nominee.
Who wasn't Hillary Clinton.
That's right. Basically, they had decided Hillary Clinton was going to be the nominee before anyone voted. And not only did they have a set of rules that favored her enormously, they also did things like, for example, make the Democratic National Committee a partner of one of the campaigns. I mean, and this stuff isn't just allegations. Later, when WikiLeaks released all the emails, I mean, if this were a court of law,
the evidentiary trail was obvious.
The jury would be out for about 15 minutes. Okay, I mean, it was all there in black and white.
Is that establishment encrusted, barnacled, still there now?
Absolutely. There are leaders who've been there for a long time. There are people in power. And a big part of the establishment is the money. Okay, the money that flows through politics.
Whose money?
Well, a lot of it it's a variety. Sometimes it's fundraisers who raise a lot of money individually. Nowadays, though,
interest groups, teachers unions.
Sure. In the Democratic Party, we have groups that are important. The big money, though, right now is moving towards the Republicans because and this is my own, and I write about this in the book. I believe what happened after 2008 is the Republicans were terrified. They saw this guy, a young African-American man, Barack Obama, who not only outraised John McCain in the traditional forms of people going to, events, bundling, fundraising, but he outraised them online in massive amounts. So they had to do something. And I think what they decided to do is they decided to change the rules. They decided to make it so that people in this country can give unlimited amounts of money anonymously to campaigns. I mean, listen, I've worked on 29 campaigns outside the United States. If people did this in, Western Europe, they'd go to jail. Okay, people can't even conceive that we have a system of campaign funding that allows people to anonymously donate tens of millions, or in the case of like Elon Musk and others, hundreds of millions of dollars individually to a campaign and have no accountability for it.
You can listen to my full conversation with Tad Devine on your favorite podcast platform. Runs about 35 minutes. It's really good. Coming up, David Crowley's win was not a surprise to David Crowley. A look back at what he told me last week right here. Our political panel will weigh on that and a whole bunch more. Let's take out. Welcome back. You know I love it. Political panel time. Matt Whitlock, Republican strategist. Hannah Moldavan, Deputy Communications Director at the DNC. So, I had David Crowley on the program last Friday. We had asked for Francesca Hung to be on for a week and a half. She turned us down. The results are the results, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just going to tell you that one was on, one was not. The one who was on won. Never mind. I want to play what David Crowley told me Friday when I said, look, the polls show you're down. What are you going to do? Listen.
Well, the one thing that we know about the polls out there is that not all of it is actually accurate. But at the end of the day, people are looking for electability. And when they look at my record, when they look at my experience being an executive and how we've brought Democrats, Republicans, and independents, especially those who are exhausted by MAGA to the table, they're looking at this campaign.
And just enough did, Hannah.
Yes, I think what you saw last night across the board, both in Wisconsin, but also in the other states with the primary, is that Democrats have momentum. The number of Democrats that turned out more than Republicans last night was 300,000. That's a lot of Democrats showing up to vote. And I think we saw some discrepancy in the polls because even the pollsters were surprised that many people turned out.
Right. Didn't know what the modeling should be based on turnout that would be in a previous election lower than actually showed up. That's one of the great variables that pollsters always struggle with. Matt?
Well, and it's not surprising that Francesca Hung turned you down because I think what killed her momentum was people getting to know her better and her getting so much media where she had to explain exhaustively that
Halloween.
She doesn't hate Thanksgiving. But I think Republicans are going to treat David Crowley as just another Democrat
but
socialist.
Clearly, this is a different dynamic.
Different dynamic, and I do think he ran a good race.
And look, he's Milwaukee County executive. That is not an insignificant position in Wisconsin politics. He's clearly successful and has something going for him, which will be different from Tom Tiffany than Francesca Hung would have been member of the state assembly.
But one challenge Crowley has is he dropped out of the race about 6 weeks ago because he was in fourth place
at the convention.
So he's got a lot of people to try and bring back together. Tiffany feels like he's got a little momentum, even though he doesn't get to face the communist who hates Thanksgiving. That would have maybe been an easier race for him. He still feels like he's got ammunition to use against Crowley.
I want to talk about a Politico poll that they released today, and they talked to people about what's most on their mind. Not surprisingly, 54% said cost of living. Interestingly, you can pull that up on the graphics, ladies and gentlemen, in the control room, of non-MAGA Trump voters. This is the second one, control room. Non-MAGA Trump voters. So the non-heart attached ones. 41% said cost of living was a failure of the Trump administration, and 28% the economy was a failure. Only 14% said cost of living was a success for Trump. 11% said the economy was a success. So these are the ones that are maybe up for grabs. Warning sign?
Definitely a warning sign. It means Republicans have their work cut out for them, which is twofold. One, try and make a case for things they've done that could set a tone for future economic success and a better sort of, living situation for people. But also the fact that a number of these Democrat candidates have ideas that might make things actually worse for them. It is a tough sell, but Republicans, have a lot of work to do between now and November.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Matt that Republicans should be really nervous about this. All of these polls, along with Donald Trump's approval rating, which is very, very low, mean that it's going to be a tough map for Republicans. But let's not forget why we're in this situation. It's because of Donald Trump and Republican policies, the war in Iran, which has caused gas prices to spike. We're looking at even the jobs numbers from last month, where the economy lost 23,000 jobs. This is from the president that's supposed to be a job creator, right? We're not seeing a good economy, and people are feeling it in their pocketbooks.
And inflation not catastrophic, but persistent.
Persistent, and we're not looking
so the White House tries to put a very good face on that.
Yeah, and of course they will. We should expect them to. But I think people are voting for Democrats, and we see really strong momentum for Democrats because they're really dissatisfied with Republicans and know we have a plan.
Hannah, you're going to get the last word because I know you want to jump in on this. The coming Democratic schedule for 2028 is on your mind. Tell my audience why.
Yeah, right now the DNC membership is going to vote on a full slate for the new primary calendar. And we're really excited about this because, one, we think we can win the White House with it. It really battle tests our nominees, starting with South Carolina, Nevada, and New Hampshire. And we think it really represents the diversity of our party, which is important for people who might have felt like their voice is left behind. We think we'll hear from all different parts of the country through this in each region, and we're excited for all of the people who are going to run in 2028 to start talking to voters.
Better check with New Hampshire. They'll always have a say on this because they have a law and always a very formidable Secretary of State who wants to enforce that law that New Hampshire must go first, regardless of what either major party says. Hannah David, Matt Whitlock, appreciate your time. Thank you so very much. Quick reminder, The Takeout is available as a podcast. I'm so happy that's true. On Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and everywhere else. You can find each show there and our long-form interviews, of which we do many, like with Tad Devine. He has a primary schedule he has on his mind, too. Happy Wednesday, everyone. This is The Takeout. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. The Daily Report is next.